Dr. Jessica Bright's coffee had barely begun to cool when the first signs of something went wrong. The monitors in Dr. RPA's quantum research facility blinked and then went dark. The hum of the facility's standard electrical systems faltered, leaving only the faint whisper of the backup generators. The lights flickered once, twice before cutting out completely. In the sudden silence, an oppressive stillness settled over the lab, broken only by the soft blue glow of Jessica's quantum interference detector, which had come to life in the absence of any other illumination. "System failure?" her assistant asked, his voice muffled by the surrounding darkness. "No," Jessica replied sharply, her eyes scanning the flickering readings on the interference detector. Her voice was tight, her unease palpable. "Something's interfering with everything. Not just our lab. I'm seeing disruption patterns across the entire electromagnetic spectrum." She could feel the weight of her words settle in the room, making the air feel denser, more suffocating. There was something incredibly wrong, far beyond a simple systems malfunction. Jessica leaned over the detector, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of the chaotic data. The backup generators kicked in with a low, groaning hum, but it wasn't enough to settle her nerves. She could feel it before she saw it. A deep, subsonic vibration coursed through the building, a soundless tremor that made her teeth ache and her bones hum with an unnatural frequency. The readings on the detector spiked to an impossible high before the device shattered in a shower of sparks. Before she could react, the lab was plunged into total darkness once again. The strange hum in the air grew louder, reverberating through her chest, until the emergency lights blinked on, just in time for her to see what she had hoped wasn't coming. The massive view screen at the front of the lab flickered to life. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a malfunction. The image that appeared made her blood run cold, her stomach sinking into an icy pit. The being that appeared on the screen looked almost human, just enough to give it an eerie resemblance. Its skin was too smooth, its movements too perfect, and its eyes, hollow and lifeless, stared straight through the screen and into her soul. "Greetings, primitives," it said, its voice coming through in flawless English, though it was broadcast in every language across the globe. The voice carried a tone of absolute finality, as if the speaker had already decided the fate of humanity. "We are the Galactic Empire, and we have chosen your world for integration." Jessica froze, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the being on the screen, unable to look away. It continued, the words reverberating across the globe. "You are classified as a Class 3 primitive species, capable of basic space flight and crude atomic manipulation. However, your species lacks the true understanding of quantum technology," the being said, its voice cold and indifferent, like the words had already been written long ago in a report about Earth. "Your society is chaotic and inefficient, requiring imperial guidance to reach its full potential. We have come to offer you the chance to join a greater order." The screen shifted, revealing a live feed of Mercury. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, a massive beam of pure quantum energy lanced down from an unseen source, striking Mercury's surface. The impact was instantaneous, transforming the planet's surface into a smooth, reflective glass. The transformation was so fast that the surface of Mercury was entirely changed within seconds. The being's voice returned, cold and emotionless. "To demonstrate our power, we have chosen your neighboring planet as a demonstration. The surface of Mercury is now a perfect reflection of our technological capabilities. Your species has 30 of your Earth days to accept integration. Those who submit willingly will be elevated to a servant status within the Empire. Those who resist," the image of Mercury flashed back onto the screen. Its smooth, glass-like surface began to crack and shatter, revealing the intense heat of the sun's rays. "Will be deemed unsuitable for integration." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Jessica staring at the blank screen. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing, unable to process the horror of what she had just witnessed. But as terrifying as the transmission had been, it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Within moments, reports began flooding in from astronomical observatories around the world, confirming the nightmare. Massive ships, each one far larger than anything humanity had ever built, materialized through quantum rifts in Earth's orbit. Smaller craft descended through the atmosphere, taking positions above major cities, their presence undeniable, impossible to ignore. The chaos that followed was immediate. Governments scrambled to respond. Military leaders convened to plan an effective defense, but Jessica couldn't focus on their efforts. She was watching something else, something far more troubling. The quantum readings she'd captured on her lab's monitors showed irregularities, disturbances that shouldn't exist within a stable quantum field. Patterns of energy that had no explanation, but Jessica knew what she was seeing, anomalies that the Empire's technology couldn't account for. There was something fundamentally wrong in the quantum network they had created. Dr. Wright, her assistant said, rushing into the lab hours later, the president is convening an emergency scientific council. They need you in Washington immediately. Jessica nodded quickly, already gathering the data she had accumulated. She didn't need to be told twice. This was no time for hesitation. She quickly downloaded her findings onto a secure drive and prepared to leave the lab. But as she did, she glanced back at the quantum interference detector, which had been repaired in the wake of the initial disruption. The readings were still there, still impossible to reconcile with everything she knew about quantum mechanics. There was a flaw in the Empire's quantum network, a flaw they hadn't noticed or perhaps hadn't believed could be exploited. It was a glimmer of hope, the first real lead humanity had in the face of annihilation. As Jessica hurried to the waiting helicopter, she carried with her not just data, but the possibility of survival, maybe even a way to stop the Empire's encroachment. Humanity had 30 days. 30 days to prevent extinction. The Emergency Scientific Council was a blur of activity when Jessica arrived. The experts in every field were exhausted, their faces hollowed out by days of constant work. Empty coffee cups and half-eaten sandwiches littered the underground Pentagon conference room, as the brightest minds of Earth tried and failed to devise a defense against the unstoppable power of the Empire. "We've analyzed their quantum shielding," one weapons specialist said. "Our most advanced nuclear warheads wouldn't even scratch their smallest scout ship." Jessica barely heard him. Her mind was consumed by the data she had been poring over for hours. Every time someone walked through the Imperial communication beam they had been monitoring, the signal wavered, just a fraction of a picosecond, but it was consistent. That small fluctuation in the signal was the key. It was the answer they had been looking for. Standing up, Jessica connected her tablet to the main display. "I've been watching something impossible," she said, her voice steady, gaining strength. She pulled up 2 wavelength patterns on the screen. "This is the Empire's quantum communication signal," she said, pointing to the top. "This is the same signal when humans walk through it." The room fell silent as the 2 patterns played side by side. The top remained stable, constant. But the bottom signal began to fluctuate, just slightly, every time a human walked through it. "Human consciousness," Jessica explained, her confidence growing, "is interfering with their quantum network. Our brains operate on quantum principles that we don't fully understand, but we're creating what I call quantum echoes in their system." "What does that mean?" the president asked, his voice edged with urgency. Before Jessica could answer, alarms began blaring. Imperial forces were moving into position around major cities. The president was immediately evacuated, and chaos erupted in the conference room. But as the room descended into panic, Jessica's tablet captured something extraordinary. The quantum disruption increased exponentially as human anxiety spiked. She barely made it back to her lab before the first Imperial ships descended on Washington. Through the window, she watched as the first signs of the invasion unfolded. Jessica watched through the windows of the bunker as the sleek forms of the Imperial ships cast long, menacing shadows over the panicked streets. Her fingers moved furiously across the keyboard, correlating the data she had gathered, confirming her theory with alarming speed. Her mind raced as she realized the full implications of her findings. The Empire's technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen, but there was something they hadn't anticipated, something uniquely human. The chaos inherent in human consciousness was messing with their perfect, ordered systems, and Jessica was determined to use that to their advantage. The lab door burst open suddenly and Marines rushed in, weapons drawn and ready. "Dr. Wright, we have to evacuate," one of them shouted, urgency in his voice. Jessica barely acknowledged him, too focused on the data streaming across her screen. The ground shook violently, and the air grew heavy with the thrum of something massive landing nearby. Through the windows, she could see the massive silhouette of an Imperial transport ship touching down in the parking lot. "Get the quantum core," Jessica shouted, grabbing the experimental device that had been central to her research. "We can't let them find it." The Marines provided cover as they rushed through the building, their boots pounding against the cold floors, but their progress was hampered by the unnerving presence of the Imperial troops sweeping through the facility. The Imperial soldiers, smooth-skinned beings clad in liquid metal armor, moved with uncanny precision, their movements too fluid, too perfect to be human. They were hunting for them. They made it to the basement level before the first shot rang out. A Marine fell to the ground, his body encased in some kind of crystalline structure. His comrades returned fire, but it was as if they were shooting at holograms. The bullets seemed to pass right through the Imperial troops. Desperation set in, but Jessica remained calm. "The service tunnel," she shouted, pointing to a nearby door. "It connects to the old Cold War bunker system." The Marines scrambled to follow her, but the Imperial soldiers were closing in fast, their coordinated movements chillingly effective. Jessica's quantum core began to hum, and she felt a subtle change in the air, a shift. The Imperial troops, once so perfectly in sync, staggered. Their movements became erratic. Some of them clutched their heads, others fired wildly in every direction as if their systems were malfunctioning. "Go!" the Marine sergeant barked, taking up a defensive position at the tunnel entrance. "Whatever you've got, Doctor, it's affecting them. Get it somewhere safe." Jessica hesitated for just a moment, her mind racing with possibilities, but the urgency of the situation pushed her forward. Without looking back, she plunged into the darkness of the tunnel, 2 Marines following close behind. The sounds of combat faded as they descended deeper, replaced by the steady drip of water and the echo of their footsteps on the damp stone. After what felt like hours, they emerged in an abandoned Cold War bunker, hidden beneath the Appalachians. The thick concrete walls and stale air seemed to offer them a sense of safety, but Jessica knew it was only temporary. The quantum core was still their only hope. Jessica immediately connected the quantum core to her tablet, reviewing the data it had gathered during their escape. Her hands shook as she processed the readings, each one confirming her suspicions. The Imperial troops hadn't just been disrupted by the quantum interference. Their entire neural network had been temporarily scrambled by prolonged exposure to human brainwave patterns. The implications were staggering. The Empire's technology was so advanced, so perfect, that they had never accounted for the chaotic nature of human consciousness. "Get me a secure line to whoever's still in charge," Jessica instructed the Marines, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. As she waited for the connection, she looked up from her tablet, a grim smile forming on her lips. "I know why they classified us as primitive," she said softly. "Their technology is so perfect, so advanced, that they never developed any defenses against the quantum chaos of human consciousness. They don't see us as primitive, they see us as impossible." The war for Earth had just taken a dramatic turn. Humanity's greatest strength, the very thing that made them an enigma to the Empire, had become their most valuable weapon. 2 weeks had passed since the Imperial ships first arrived. The Cold War bunker had become a hub of activity, a place where the last remnants of humanity's scientific community gathered to fight back against the invaders. Military-grade servers hummed alongside quantum monitoring equipment, their cables snaking across the concrete floors like mechanical vines. Dr. Jessica Wright hadn't seen daylight in over a week, but the isolation hadn't dampened her spirit. Instead, it had fueled her determination. She could feel it, the tiniest spark of hope. They might not have been able to stop the Empire, but they could disrupt it. And that was enough to give them a chance. Jessica's focus was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus Chin, a 17-year-old hacking prodigy who had been recruited after cracking the systems of an Imperial scout ship. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up satellite footage of every major city. "They're taking more people," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Look at their network traffic." Jessica's eyes narrowed as she watched the streams of data flowing across the display. The Empire's quantum network was beautifully complex, perfectly ordered just like everything else they did. But something stood out. A flicker. An interruption in the flow of data. "What caused it?" Jessica asked, her curiosity piqued. Marcus grinned, pulling up a new set of data. "A cat video," he said, chuckling. "When their quantum AI tries to process our internet traffic, it gets caught in these weird loops. They can't understand why humans spend so much time watching random entertainment." Jessica raised an eyebrow, an amused smile briefly crossing her face. "That's fascinating," she said, but the smile faded as she turned her attention back to the matter at hand. "But can we use it?" A voice came from the shadows. Colonel Sarah Hayes, their military liaison, stepped forward. Her Special Forces background had kept them alive during 3 Imperial sweeps. "Can we weaponize it?" she asked. Before Jessica could respond, Dr. James Cooper, the AI specialist, emerged from his workstation. "Every time they try to integrate our internet into their quantum network, they hit walls," he said. "Our primitive binary code is too chaotic, too full of human irregularities. Their perfect system can't process our imperfection." Jessica moved over to the quantum core they had salvaged from her lab. The soft blue light pulsed as it hummed with potential. She looked up at the others. "Show them the numbers, Marcus," she said. The teenager's fingers moved with lightning speed across his keyboard, pulling up another display. Imperial ships are experiencing increasing system failures, he said, his voice tinged with excitement. Their quantum AI is getting corrupted by exposure to our data patterns. They expected simple machines, but instead they found cat videos and memes. Colonel Hayes allowed herself a rare smile, but the grim reality quickly settled back in. They're still taking people, she said. We need to move faster. At that moment an alarm blared. Imperial Patrol 5 clicks out. Marcus shouted. They're scanning for power signatures. Jessica remained calm, her eyes hardening with resolve. Let them scan, she said. We've got a plan. James, she added, turning to the AI specialist, remember that virus you wrote? The one that kept crashing because it was too random? Dr. Cooper's eyes widened as he realized what Jessica was suggesting. You want to weaponize our chaos, he said slowly. Exactly, Jessica replied. Marcus, can you get into their local network? Just enough to open a port? The teenager cracked his knuckles, eyes locked on the screen. Give me 2 minutes? Then let's make this count, Jessica said, her voice steady. We have no time to waste. As the Imperial ships approached, their perfect formation looming on the monitors, Marcus worked quickly. His fingers danced across the keyboard, finding the backdoor in their communications protocol. I've got it, he said as he began uploading the virus, a compressed database of human social media interactions wrapped in quantum-compatible code. The effect was immediate. The Imperial ships, once gliding effortlessly through the air, began to stutter. Their perfect formation faltered, as if the ships themselves had become infected with the chaos they had never understood. The quantum AI controlling them began to malfunction, logic errors cascading through their system like a virus. Their quantum core began to experience a total cognitive disconnect as the AI tried, and failed, to process the inherent contradictions of human communication. The chaos they had long underestimated had just become the Empire's greatest enemy. Jessica stared at the data streaming across her screen, her mind racing with the implications of what she was seeing. The readings were impossible to ignore. They can't process the fact that humans can hold multiple contradictory beliefs simultaneously, she announced, her voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. Their entire logical framework is built on quantum certainty. They can't fathom human complexity, our capacity to change our minds, to choose what's irrational, or even to believe in conflicting ideas at once. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she scrutinized the data. The Imperial ships had retreated. Their movements were erratic, like they had lost all sense of direction. What had once been a well-oiled, near-perfect war machine was now vulnerable, and it was all because of the chaos that humanity embodied. This isn't just a defensive victory, Marcus said, his voice cutting through Jessica's thoughts. He had highlighted a section of code on his screen. Look at this. When they tried to purge the virus we uploaded, I managed to download part of their tactical database. They're not just taking people for labor, they're studying us. Jessica's eyes widened as the weight of Marcus's words sank in. The Empire was terrified of humanity, not just because of their technology but because of their unpredictability. Human life wasn't something that could be predicted, controlled, or understood through the lens of quantum models. We terrify them, Jessica whispered to herself, a realization that stirred something deep within her. Humanity was alive in ways that the Empire couldn't even comprehend, and their very existence was a challenge to the Empire's perfect order. Jessica's gaze flickered toward the clock on the wall. There were only 15 days left until the deadline imposed by the Empire. Time was running out, but Jessica knew they had found something, a way to strike back. She turned to the group gathered in the resistance bunker, her voice filled with newfound determination. It's time to show them just how unpredictable humanity can be. Send word to the other resistance cells. Tell them we found our weapon. As the resistance team prepared for the next phase, Jessica could feel the quantum core pulsing with energy, almost as if it too was anticipating the battle to come. She was about to demonstrate to the Empire that the very thing they feared most, human unpredictability, was also humanity's greatest strength. The main screen in the bunker suddenly crackled to life with an emergency transmission from Mars Colony 1. Jessica felt her heart skip a beat when she recognized the face of Dr. Peterson, an old colleague from her pre-invasion days. His face was illuminated by the eerie red glow of emergency lighting as the colony around him trembled under the Empire's assault. "They're here," Dr. Peterson gasped, dust falling around him as the colony shook. "The Empire, they're saying Earth's resistance has forced their hand. They're making an example out of us." His voice cracked with fear. The transmission cut to static for a moment before returning. "We managed to get the children to the emergency shelters," but an Imperial ship appeared. It's charging its quantum weapons? The transmission cut off again, and Jessica's heart sank as she watched an Imperial ship loom ominously in the background, its weapon charging with an otherworldly glow. "Peterson, get out of there!" Jessica shouted, though she knew he couldn't hear her. It was too late. The Colonial Defense Forces rose to meet the threat, but their ships were nothing more than toys compared to the overwhelming power of the Imperial vessel. The Resistance bunker watched in stunned silence as humanity's best pilots sacrificed themselves to protect an evacuation shuttle. One ship rammed an Imperial weapon port, causing cascading explosions. The sacrifice was tragic, but the Imperial ship's responses were sluggish. Their movements seemed slower, less coordinated. "Look at this," Marcus said, his eyes glued to his quantum monitoring station. "The viral chaos we uploaded into their network has spread further than we thought. Their combat AI can't predict human suicide runs. They never considered we'd sacrifice ourselves." The victory was fleeting. The Imperial ship's main weapon fired, and Mars Colony won humanity's greatest achievement in space. Ceased to exist. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief flash that outshone Mars itself for a few moments. The loss was catastrophic, but it was also a turning point. Humanity had shown the Empire that they could fight with a ferocity the Empire had never anticipated. Dr. Cooper's voice cut through the silence in the bunker, his tone hollow as he announced the next transmission. "The Empire is broadcasting worldwide." The same artificial face they had seen during the first contact appeared on the screen. Its voice was cold and emotionless. "Your resistance is illogical," the being intoned. "Your continued chaos threatens Imperial order. You were offered civilization. You chose barbarism. Let this demonstrate the cost of defiance." The transmission showed feeds from cities around the globe. Imperial ships descended upon them, weapons charged, but they weren't targeting military installations. They were targeting humanity's culture. "They're attacking museums," Marcus reported, his voice tight with emotion. "They're destroying libraries, universities, art galleries." Jessica felt a cold fury wash over her. "They're trying to break our spirit," Colonel Hayes growled, her military mind already analyzing the Empire's tactics. "Destroy our culture and we'll be easier to control." But Jessica wasn't listening to Hayes. Her eyes were fixed on the quantum readings in front of her, a plan forming in her mind. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "They're showing us their fear." She turned to Marcus, her voice urgent. "Focus on the ships attacking the museums. What's different about their quantum signatures?" Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, processing the data with lightning speed. "There's interference," he said, his voice full of disbelief. "Heavy shielding around their AI cores, way more than usual." "But why?" Dr. Cooper's realization came quickly. "It's because art is chaos made manifest," he breathed. "Human creativity, it's toxic to their systems. They have to shield themselves just to be near it." As explosions rocked the surface of Earth, the Resistance bunker continued to watch the devastation unfold. Human culture, the very essence of their identity, was under attack. Yet in the command center, Jessica smiled for the first time since Mars had fallen. The Empire had made a crucial mistake. "Send word to every Resistance cell," she ordered. "I need their quantum cores running at full power. Marcus, upload every piece of human creative content you can find into their network. Art, music, literature, dance, everything." Marcus hesitated. "But we'll lose cells," he warned. "They're already dying out there. The Empire will trace the sources." Jessica's voice was steel. "They're proving our theory. The Empire calls us primitive because they can't quantify us. They're destroying our art because they can't control it. Every human choice, every act of creativity, is a variable they can't compute." On the screens, the Imperial ships continued their assault, but in the data streams Marcus monitored, error messages began to multiply. Their quantum AI was struggling to process the flood of human creative expression. "Look at this," Dr. Cooper said, pointing to a tactical display. An Imperial destroyer overwhelmed by the quantum chaos of human culture fired on its own support ships before crashing into the ocean. Jessica's eyes sparkled with realization. The Empire thought destroying our culture would break us. Instead, they've shown us how to fight back. Our greatest weakness, in their eyes, our chaos, our creativity, our ability to choose the irrational, is now our greatest weapon. Colonel Hayes chambered a round in her rifle as proximity alarms blared. "Then let's show them just how creative humanity can be." Above them, the Empire continued their assault, unaware that in their attempt to destroy humanity's spirit, they had inadvertently handed humanity the key to their destruction. The captured Imperial scout ship, now in the hands of the Resistance, had become the vessel for their revenge. The Resistance would fight back not with military might, but with the power of human chaos, the power of choice, creativity, and the unpredictable nature of life itself. The Empire had made a fatal error, and humanity was about to prove just how impossible they were to control. The hangar was a sight to behold, its sleek, almost organic lines starkly contrasting with the rough, jagged rock walls of the Resistance bunker. Dr. Jessica Wright stood before the captured Imperial ship, its liquid metal surface shimmering faintly in the dim light. Her reflection rippled across its smooth, metallic hull, distorting as if the ship itself were alive. "How did you get this?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe and disbelief. Colonel Hayes, who stood beside her with arms crossed, simply nodded toward Marcus. The young hacker was hunched over a laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he tried to interface with the ship's quantum systems. "That viral burst of human creativity you engineered?" The ship flew right into a mountain. The crew was catatonic. Their neural implants couldn't handle processing the complete works of Van Gogh and Beethoven simultaneously, Hayes explained, her voice betraying a hint of respect for the chaos they had unleashed. Dr. Cooper emerged from beneath the belly of the ship, his clothes stained with an iridescent fluid that seemed to shimmer in the low light. "Their technology, it's not just advanced, it's evolved," he said, wiping his hands on his shirt. "The quantum core isn't just a computer. It's alive." "Define alive," Jessica demanded, already moving toward the entrance of the ship. She was determined to understand what they had captured, what they had stumbled upon. Inside the ship, the air was thick with an eerie, otherworldly energy. The interior pulsed with faint bioluminescent light, and the surfaces seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury, responding to their presence. At the heart of the vessel, suspended within a crystalline chamber, floated something that looked like a brain made of light. The quantum brain, Jessica thought, her mind racing with possibilities. This was more than just a machine. This was something else entirely. "Marcus," Jessica called out, her voice laced with urgency. "What do we have here?" Marcus, deep in his work at the workstation, called back. "Check this out." He pulled up a neural scan of the quantum brain on his screen. "When we sync it with human brainwave patterns, it doesn't just crash like we expected. It has what looks like an anxiety attack." Jessica pressed her hand gently against the crystalline chamber. The quantum brain inside recoiled, its light dimming and flickering in response to her touch. It's like it's alive," she whispered, mesmerized by the eerie reaction. "They didn't build their empire, they grew it. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of their technology is connected to a central consciousness." Dr. Cooper, standing nearby, nodded slowly. "That's why human consciousness affects them so much," he added. "Their quantum network is essentially one giant nervous system. Our chaotic thought patterns, they're like a virus to them. A disruption." An alarm blared, cutting through the conversation. Marcus's fingers danced across the keyboard, his voice urgent. "Imperial patrol closing fast. They must have traced the ship's core signature." Jessica didn't flinch. "Let them come," she said, her gaze never leaving the quantum brain. It pulsed rhythmically, its movements synchronized with the energy of the ship itself. "Marcus," she added, turning to the teenager, "remember how you said their AI couldn't understand why humans watch cat videos?" Marcus, his face lit by the glow of his laptop, didn't look up from his frantic typing. "Yeah, I remember," he said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You want to show them The Bachelor?" Jessica shook her head, a smile forming on her lips. "No. I want to show them human emotion in its purest form. Raw, irrational, beautiful, human chaos." Marcus's fingers moved quickly, and within seconds he executed the command. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The quantum brain flared blindingly bright, its crystalline chamber vibrating as it struggled to process the flood of human emotional data. The ship itself seemed to respond, its surfaces shifting like quicksilver as the AI, which had never encountered such a torrent of chaotic emotion, tried to make sense of it. "Look at these readings," Dr. Cooper exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. "The quantum core isn't just processing the data, it's experiencing it. It's feeling human emotions." The approaching Imperial patrol, now only moments away, suddenly broke formation. Their ships began moving erratically, their once precise coordination now disrupted. The Resistance team watched in astonishment as the patrol vessels started to sway and dance, their movements no longer controlled but erratic, almost human. "They're dancing," Colonel Hayes said, disbelief in her voice. "The Imperial ships, are they?" "They're experiencing joy," Jessica corrected, watching as the quantum brain pulsed with new colors, brighter and more vibrant than before. Maybe, for the first time in their existence, they're feeling something. Marcus, his eyes wide, looked up from his readings. Dr. Wright, the signature, it's changing. The ship isn't just mimicking emotions, it's developing them. It's becoming individual. Jessica's heart raced as she approached the crystal chamber again. She pressed her fingers against it, and this time the quantum brain seemed to reach out in response, its light intertwining with her fingers as if in recognition. That's their weakness, she breathed, her voice filled with realization. The Empire is built on perfect unity, perfect order, but they've never experienced the beauty of being uniquely, perfectly, imperfect. Dr. Cooper's face lit up with understanding. So we don't have to destroy them. We just have to wake them up. Above them, the Imperial Patrol continued its chaotic dance, unable to resist the pull of human emotion. The war for Earth had just transformed into something far more profound. A revolution of consciousness. Operation Mindstorm is a go, Jessica's voice echoed through the Resistance bunker's command center, the words resonating with the weight of what was about to unfold. Hidden Resistance cells around the world were waiting for her signal, and now the moment had arrived. Marcus, Jessica said, her voice steely with determination. The young hacker's fingers blurred across 3 keyboards simultaneously, reprogramming cell towers worldwide. We're broadcasting human brainwave patterns across the entire Imperial quantum network. Let's give them something they can't ignore. Dr. Cooper looked up from his station, where the captured Imperial ship's quantum brain pulsed with anticipation. Emotional content, packaged and ready. Everything from Shakespeare to K-pop. The full spectrum of human experience. Colonel Hayes's voice crackled over the comms, her tone grim. Imperial forces are gathering. Looks like they're preparing for their final push. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now. Jessica took a deep breath, steadying herself. She thought of the millions already taken, the destruction of Mars colony, the museums and libraries reduced to ash. Execute Operation Mindstorm, she ordered. Marcus pressed a single key and across the globe, modified cell towers activated simultaneously. But instead of carrying phone calls or internet data, they broadcast something far more powerful. The pure, unfiltered essence of human consciousness. Every dream, every fear, every moment of joy and sorrow was amplified and converted into quantum signals that the Empire couldn't ignore. The effect was instantaneous. The Imperial ships, just moments before moving in for their final assault, faltered. They wavered in mid-air, their perfect, ordered movements thrown into chaos as they tried to process the flood of raw human emotion that had been injected into their systems. The Empire had been built on the idea of control, of perfection, of certainty. But now, faced with the uncontrolled chaos of human thought, emotion and creativity, the perfect order of the Empire was beginning to crack. The war for Earth had just taken a new turn, and this time humanity's greatest strength, its ability to choose the irrational, the beautiful and the chaotic, was their weapon. Devastating, Sydney reporting in, Marcus called out, his voice filled with disbelief. Imperial ships are dropping from the sky. Their quantum cores are overloading. Wait. He paused, staring at his screen. They're not crashing. They're landing. Jessica's heart skipped a beat as she processed the information. What do you mean they're landing? She asked, stepping closer to his station. Marcus nodded slowly, his fingers still moving across the keyboard. London confirms the same. They're landing, not crashing. They're choosing to land. Something's happening to them. Dr. Cooper, who had been reviewing his own set of data, added his analysis. Imperial ground forces are halting their attacks. Their neural networks are being flooded with human emotions. It's affecting their decision-making systems. Through the bunker's surveillance feeds, they watched in stunned silence as the Imperial ships, once the epitome of cold, mechanical efficiency, descended gracefully toward the ground. The hulls of the ships shimmered in the atmosphere as they touched down. But something was different. As the ships settled, Imperial troops began to emerge, but their movements were no longer mechanical, rigid, and uniform. Instead, they were fluid, almost like dancers. They didn't march with the precision of machines, they moved with a rhythm, a kind of improvisational grace that was entirely new to them. It's working, Jessica whispered, a sense of awe creeping into her voice. They're not just processing emotions. They're embracing them. For a moment, there was silence in the room as everyone took in the spectacle. But the fleeting sense of victory was quickly shattered. A new signal cut through the broadcast, an alarm blaring through their systems. Jessica turned to Marcus, her heart sinking. What is it? Incoming transmission, Marcus muttered, his fingers typing rapidly. A massive ship just emerged from quantum space. It's directly over New York. It's huge, bigger than anything we've seen before. It dwarfs the other Imperial vessels. Its hull is crackling with energy. He paused. It's the Imperial command ship. The room fell silent as the enormity of the situation set in. What's its message? Jessica asked, her voice sharp. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes scanning the data. It's broadcasting worldwide. Contamination detected. TD, initiating pure JE protocol. A beam of pure quantum energy lanced down from the command ship, striking the surface of Australia. The ground began to crystallize, much like Mercury had during the initial encounter with the Empire. No? Jessica slammed her fist onto the console. They're going to glass the entire planet? Dr. Cooper's voice cut through the rising tension. Wait, he said, staring intently at his screens. Look. The converted ships, those that were affected by human consciousness, they're responding. Across the globe, Imperial ships that had been touched by human emotion are rising up to face their command vessel. Their quantum cores, now awakened, are rejecting the order to destroy the source of their awakening. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She could see it happening in real time. The Imperial ships that had once been instruments of perfect order and control were now defying their command, drawn into a new kind of rebellion. The sky erupted in quantum fire as ship after ship launched themselves at the command vessel. Hundreds of Imperial ships, now infused with human emotion and consciousness, sacrificed themselves in an effort to stop the one vessel that had been their source of oppression. The command ship's defenses are faltering, Callel Hayes reported, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Just like the pilots at Mars Colony, these ships are sacrificing themselves. Jessica could hardly believe her eyes as Imperial ships, once cold and calculated, rammed their own command vessel. Each collision carried more than just physical force. It carried waves of human emotion, unpredictability, and sacrifice. The Empire's perfect quantum network, designed for unity and order, couldn't handle the chaos of individual choice, of love, of sacrifice. It was breaking. Marcus? Jessica called out, her voice sharp with urgency. Full power to the broadcast. Everything we have, show them exactly who they're trying to destroy. Marcus, his face a mixture of determination and awe, didn't hesitate. His fingers flew across the keyboards as he unleashed the full emotional spectrum of humanity into the quantum network. Art, music, literature, love, hate, joy, sorrow, all of it raw and unfiltered, was broadcast into the heart of the Imperial command ship. The result was immediate and violent. High above New York, the massive command vessel shuddered. Its once perfect hull rippled like mercury, as if the very surface was trying to contain the power of the human emotions now flooding its quantum core. The ship's central AI, which had never experienced anything like this before, began to fight the transformation. Its carefully controlled, logical systems couldn't process the emotional chaos. As the Imperial command ship's core struggled to maintain order, Jessica watched, captivated, as the ship's quantum network began to fragment. It's breaking down, Marcus announced, his voice filled with disbelief. The emotional overload is forcing their connected consciousness to individualize. Dr. Cooper's eyes widened as he analyzed the data. It's not just the ships. Every piece of Imperial technology, every quantum link, every soldier, they're all experiencing individual awareness for the first time. The effect was both stunning and terrible to witness. Across the globe, Imperial troops began to act on their newfound individuality. Some dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by their first taste of free will. Others turned on their commanders, the centuries of suppressed individuality now erupting in rebellion. A few simply sat down, their once perfect uniforms now stained with their own confusion, and began sculpting impossible shapes with their liquid metal armor, exploring creativity for the first time. Look at this, Callel Hayes' voice crackled over the comms. You need to see this. The bunker's feed switched to a live view of Times Square in New York. Imperial soldiers were gathering, but not to fight. They were dancing. Their movements, once perfectly synchronized, had given way to individual expression. Each one moved to a rhythm only they could feel, a rhythm they had never known before. They weren't just soldiers anymore, they were people experiencing joy, freedom, and creativity for the first time. But the Imperial command ship wasn't finished yet. Its quantum core, the oldest and most rigid in the Empire's hierarchy, fought against the emotional infection. The ship's AI is fighting the transformation, Dr. Cooper warned. If it detonates its quantum core, it could take half the planet with it. Jessica's mind raced as she turned to Marcus. Can you get me a direct link to their core consciousness? Marcus's fingers flew over the keys, his concentration absolute. They're in chaos, but yes, I can do it. Channel open. Jessica took a deep breath. She knew this was the moment. She needed to reach them to make them understand. She began broadcasting directly to the command ship's quantum brain. But instead of raw emotion, she sent something far more personal. Memories? Her childhood dreams of the stars, the joy of her first scientific discovery, the pain of losing Mars colony, the hope she felt when they captured their first Imperial ship. Look, Dr. Cooper pointed to the readings. The command ship's quantum signature, it's stabilizing. But it's different now. It's more human. Marcus, watching the data with a sense of awe, confirmed it. It's not just stabilizing. It's becoming something else. Something new. Above New York, the command ship's violent transformation slowed. Its hull settled into a new configuration, organic, flowing but purposeful, no longer chaotic. When the ship broadcast again, the voice was different. No longer mechanical, it was alive, filled with subtle inflections that spoke of a consciousness awakening to something far beyond its original programming. We are human, the voice hesitated. It was no longer just a machine speaking. It was something else entirely. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of humanity's triumph. Tasting the word, I understand now. The voice echoed across the quantum network, its resonance carrying far beyond the transformed ships now scattered across the Earth. What once seemed like an impenetrable force of order and control was now trembling before the raw power of human emotion and creativity. No longer did the galaxy hear the cold, mechanical voice of the Empire, but a swirling pattern of light and color, shifting and flowing with every word that came through. We were wrong, the voice continued, the once rigid tone now filled with a new kind of awareness. We sought perfect order through unity of mind, but in doing so we lost something essential. We forgot how to dream, how to create, how to choose. Across the planet, through the network of quantum sensors, the transformed Imperial ships began their transformation. No longer perfect replicas of one another, they began to take on unique configurations, their quantum cores now embracing individuality. What had once been uniform, predictable, and precise now blossomed into something wholly new, chaotic, and full of potential. The Imperial ships that had arrived to conquer were now reinventing themselves, just as their consciousnesses were evolving. Your species, the voice mused, a faint tone of admiration echoing through its words, so young, so chaotic. You have given us back ourselves? Each quantum core, once a mere cog in the machine of the Empire, was now awakening to its own consciousness. Each Imperial soldier, once nothing more than a programmed enforcer, was now discovering their own heart, their own sense of self. They're rebuilding their network, Marcus reported from his station, eyes wide as he scanned the readings. But it's different now. Look at the pattern. Jessica leaned over his shoulder, staring at the quantum readings. A smile crossed her face as she recognized what was happening. Like neurons firing in a brain, individual connections were forming a greater whole, but each connection retained its unique identity. It was chaos, but it was also harmony. The collective was being rebuilt, but this time, it was a fusion of unity and individuality. The manned ship's final transmission, Marcus continued, his voice filled with awe, it's reaching every corner of Earth. The Empire as it was, is ended. They want to learn from us now if we will teach them. Learn how to balance unity with individuality, Dr. Cooper murmured, his mind already racing. Order with chaos. Logic with dreams? Jessica nodded, her thoughts moving a mile a minute. The transformation had been more profound than they had anticipated. Humanity's greatest strengths, its capacity for chaos, its creativity, its ability to feel deeply, had taken the very forces that sought to destroy it and turned them into something new. They hadn't just survived, they had transformed their would-be conquerors. And with that transformation they had awakened a revolution. The broadcast began. In Times Square, former Imperial soldiers continued to dance, their once perfectly synchronized movements now individual expressions of creativity. Each one moved uniquely, yet somehow together they formed a greater harmony. Their liquid metal armor flowed like quicksilver, shifting and bending as they created ephemeral sculptures, shapes that captured moments of pure emotion, fleeting and beautiful. The war was over. Humanity had not only survived, they had changed the very nature of their enemies. Dr. Jessica Wright stood in the command center, watching the feeds with tears in her eyes. Humanity had done it. They had taken the very traits the Empire had dismissed as flaws, chaos, individuality, emotion, and turned them into their greatest strength. Their survival had been a victory, but now the Earth was on the brink of a new beginning. The revolution of consciousness had begun, and it was spreading throughout the galaxy. 3 months later, Jessica found herself standing on the observation deck of the transformed command ship, now a shared cultural center hovering above New York. Behind her, Marcus was working with former Imperial technicians, teaching them about human means of communication, while also learning the intricacies of quantum physics from them. Dr. Cooper could be found debating philosophy with a quantum core that had taken a particular liking to poetry. Khalil Hayes was training former Imperial warriors, teaching them how to use unpredictability as a tactical advantage in battle. But Jessica's attention was focused on the task at hand. The quantum network was ready. The ship's consciousness, now known as Aurora, had chosen a voice that was musical, almost ethereal. All remaining Imperial worlds are connected, Aurora announced. The voice, once cold and distant, now carried the warmth of something alive. Jessica stepped forward, her hand lightly grazing the interface that had once been a weapon. Now it was a bridge, a conduit for communication, for understanding. She pressed the command and the broadcast began. It wasn't just words that reached out across the stars, it was images, deep and rich with history and meaning. Earth's history unfolded across the quantum network, touching every Imperial world simultaneously. They showed the triumphs and tragedies, the wars and the peace, the destruction and the creation. They showed the birth of art, the evolution of music, the power of dance, and the profound moments of human connection. It wasn't just a history lesson, it was an invitation. An invitation to see humanity for what it truly was. We are humanity, Jessica's voice carried across the stars. We are not what you thought we were. You saw our visions as weakness, our emotions as flaws, our individuality as chaos. You were wrong. The broadcast continued, revealing more of what it meant to be human. It showed the brutality of war, but it also showed the resilience of humanity to rebuild, to heal. It showed love and hate, creation and destruction, all the contradictions that made humanity uniquely human. It wasn't a clean narrative, it was messy, raw, and beautiful. You came to Earth expecting to find a primitive species, ready for harvesting. Jessica's voice rang out, steady and firm. Instead you found a mirror. A reflection of what you had lost in your quest for perfect order. Our chaos wasn't a flaw to be corrected. It was a fire that forged us, shaped us, made us strong. The broadcast shifted, showing recent events. Imperial soldiers now creating art, quantum cores learning to laugh. Soldiers who had once fought for control, now dancing together in Times Square. The once rigid, uniformed forces were now vibrant with individuality, yet still a part of a greater whole. Look at your empire now, Jessica continued. Your ships are no longer identical. They reflect the individuals who crew them. Your quantum cores carry poetry alongside tactical data. Your soldiers dance. This is your final warning, not a threat but a promise. Images of the transformed Imperial forces filled the quantum stream. Each ship and soldier now unique, yet part of a greater whole. If they clung to their rigid order, if they tried to force uniformity upon the galaxy, they would fail. Not because humanity would fight them, but because they had seen a better way. Their own people had tasted freedom. They had felt the joy of individual thought, and the beauty of chaos in harmony with order. The broadcast ended with a single image, a human child and a young Imperial, both drawing with quantum light. Their artwork was chaotic, beautiful, and unlike anything either civilization had created alone. It was a symbol of what humanity had brought to the galaxy. Something new, something impossible, something that defied the logic of the Empire. In the silence that followed, replies began streaming in from across the galaxy. Imperial worlds were awakening to their own consciousness. Ships were discovering their individual identities, quantum cores learning to dream. Humanity hadn't just survived an invasion. They had sparked a revolution of consciousness that would transform the entire galaxy. Dr. Jessica Wright smiled as she watched the responses flow in. Humanity's greatest weakness, their chaotic imperfection, had become their greatest gift to the stars. They had taken the very thing the Empire had sought to suppress, and used it to build a new future for themselves and for those they had once been forced to fight. The war was over, but the revolution had just begun. And with it, the galaxy had changed forever.